We just heard a wonderful performance, and many people asked me before this, why did I choose this topic for today's talk, when aspirational turns illiberal, rise of an impatient new India. That's because everybody is now talking of change in India. And I will tell you how this thought came to my mind. This thought first came to my mind when India today was bringing out its Independence Day issue, and we were looking at what has changed in India, and the tone of the issue was very upbeat, achhe din aa gaye, ya aa rahe hain, because that is the mood in the country. People in the country think after every election when there's a new government, people are optimistic. But this time, because it's been a very fundamental shift in Indian politics, level of optimism is even higher. So it just occurred to me that maybe something else has changed also. It's a good thing that we are optimistic. And that thought was triggered by something completely and entirely different. That thought was triggered by what else but cricket. Because just before that, towards the third week of July, was our cricket test match in Lords. The second of the series, the only one in which we defeated England. After that, we lost the next three. But if you remember that test match, the one thing that stood out after the test match was not so much our victory, not so much also Ishant Sharma's bowling, which won us the match, but it was Ravindra Jadeja's fight with the English bowler Jimmy Anderson. And did you see something happened between them when they were leaving the field in the previous match? Some words were exchanged. Ravindra Jadeja complained that Anderson had pushed him. Only that had to happen. There were two players involved. One made a complaint. Other said, I haven't done it. He also used abusive words with me. We exchanged abusive words. But the entire country immediately jumped to the side of Ravindra Jadeja, our boy, our player. Don't confuse me with facts, right? My boy must be right. Then what happened? It became such a big controversy that a court of inquiry was set up. A full-fledged judge was invited from South Africa, a neutral country, to hold that inquiry. Hearings took place, players came and stood witness, and the judge finally concluded that nobody was guilty, and if at all, both were equally guilty. Now, anybody who knows MS Dhoni's team, this current Indian cricket team, know that they will not take nonsense from anybody. White man, black man, brown man, khaki man, doesn't matter. And anybody who knows Ravindra Jadeja knows that he's more likely than the other guy to give it back to the other guy. But nobody wanted to raise any questions. Nobody wanted to even respect the judge's order. Everybody said the judge is biased. And I kept on saying, how can the judge be biased against us, against India? Because India controls world cricket. And Indian is the chairman of International Cricket Council. India now funds all of the world's cricket. We can get rules changed. We can get umpires changed. We can have some player caught for tampering ball, get away with light sentence. We can do anything. But where is this sense of injustice coming from? It gave me the idea that maybe we are getting into a state of mind right now, in this upsurge of joy and optimism that says that my nation can never be wrong, that my nation is always right. I never studied any social sciences, no history, geography, psychology, political science, economics, nothing. I studied botany, zoology, chemistry. But that doesn't stop you from reading. So I researched it a little bit. In fact, I was in Bombay that night. And I kept on thinking that, do we have to be nationalistic to be patriotic? Do we have to be patriotic to be nationalistic? Is there a difference? And it seemed like there was a difference, but I was not able to quite place my finger on it until I found an old essay by who else but George Orwell. And he wrote this essay in the 40s and early 40s when Europe was all being set on fire because of hyper-nationalism. You know, Hitler's nationalism and, competing nationalisms that came up. And because of that, all of Europe was on fire. This essay was written 70 years ago, and he said, George Orwell said, nationalism is not to be confused with patriotism. And he explained that two are different and opposing ideas. By patriotism, he said, I mean devotion to a particular place and a particular way of life. And I will elaborate this, which one believes to be the best in the world, but has no wish to force on other people. कि हम हिंदुस्तानी हैं, हमारा देश इतना अच्छा है कि तुम सब हिंदुस्तानी बनो. That goes to the other extreme. In that stunningly prescient essay written when Europe was burning under the fire of nationalism, Orwell made this distinction even clearer. And I'm quoting him, he said, patriotism is of its nature defensive, both militarily and culturally. Nationalism, on the other hand, is inseparable from the desire for power. Not surprisingly, Orwell concluded that nationalism is the worst enemy of peace. Now, how do we explain this? I know I'm getting into heavy stuff. I can disagree with my nation, with my country, on any of its policies. I can disagree with my nation even on its Kashmir policy. I mean, I don't, but I can. But I can disagree with my nation on any of its policies and yet be a patriot, yet love my nation. But if I am a nationalist, then I can't disagree. I have to conform to everything. Then I don't live in a democracy. Certainly, I do not live in a liberal democracy. In a liberal democracy, everybody has a right to disagree, and everybody has a right to be patriotic while she disagrees. But India is not like that, and that's where I used the Ravindra Jadeja example of his fight with Anderson. In fact, one of the English TV channels immediately created a hashtag called Slanderson, as if Anderson has done slander on India, without going into any facts. Now, all of you are watching this Sarita Devi story. I'm using sports because on a post-lunch afternoon, that's the only way to keep people awake. You've been following the story of the Indian boxer in Incheon, who's apparently been denied a bout that should have been hers. But there was also another player. There were also referees. I'm sure the South Koreans have a point of view. We may still be right. Our boxer may still be right. But for all the people who are taking a strong and angry position in support of her, I'd like to know how many have actually seen that bout. That bout is not more than 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. But almost nobody has seen it because nobody wants any facts. Today, my nation is always right, we are always right, and then it goes on. My society is always right, my religion is always right, my gender is always right, my caste is always right, my neighborhood is always right, my group is always right, my NGO is always right, my political party is always right, my newspaper is always right. So, the space for open debate has now been shrinking. And I'll give you some more examples of that. So can I have some water? Indian judiciary is among the most liberal institutions in India. In fact, why do we need institutions in a democracy? We need institutions precisely to protect us from majoritarian excess. Because this idea that now I have the majority, I can do what I want is wrong. If that was the idea, then Hitler was right. That is not the idea. You can have a majority, but you have to come and govern under the principles of your nation's constitution. That constitution grants many rights to citizens. Our constitution is wonderful. But to protect that constitution and to protect those rights and to make sure that nobody is able to use the power of brute majority to deny the citizen those rights, particularly the lonely citizen or the minority or the only one left in a corner, you need institutions. So you have the election commission, you have the judiciary, you have the media to some extent, you have the civil society, NGOs, activists. All these are institutions of a democracy. Of these, the most liberal by far, even more liberal than the media, has been the judiciary, particularly the Supreme Court of India. In India, if I may digress a little bit, there is no constitutional guarantee for press freedom. There is nothing in our constitution, there is nothing in our law book that says press will never be gagged. There is Article 19 of the Constitution which gives us all freedom of speech. Besides that, there is nothing. But what has happened? Over the years, Supreme Court has interpreted all media-related cases in the light of Article 19 in such a way that they have made the most liberal interpretation of Article 19 of the Constitution to give always weigh in with the media whenever a question of its freedom has come. And how did this become so strong? It became so strong. Look, you discover the value of something only when it is denied to you. So Indian media was denied its freedom during the emergency by Mrs. Gandhi. She imposed censorship. She took away our freedoms. And then the people of India said, look, this bloody press, they've shut up. I don't like it. And remember, this is 1975. There is no TV. Radio is fully controlled by the government. There is very few newspapers. There is very poor literacy in India, but there is a strong democratic impulse. So it was during the emergency that people of India said, we will never allow our media to be gagged. And then the Supreme Court kept on interpreting that point of view, because that was the wish of the people of India. So the emergency actually brought about a social contract between Indian media and the people of India. And people of India guaranteed our freedoms through the Supreme Court. What's happening with the Supreme Court now? See a string of judgments by the Supreme Court on the issue of media and liberal rights of free speech. I think about 4 years back, Supreme Court set up a committee under Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, under the INB Secretary, to suggest some reasonable ground rules or restrictions on media, particularly TV, in cases of riots or civil disturbance. Now, this had come up as a reaction to exaggerated coverage of Gujar agitation and riots in Rajasthan, where the visual of one policeman beating some people or swinging his lathi at some people was shown again and again and again and again. It gave the impression that everybody was being beaten by hundreds of policemen. So Supreme Court responded to it, and they set up this committee under Fali Nariman, but including ex-officio secretary was Secretary INB, and I was named on that committee. Pranay Roy was named on that committee. A couple of other people, senior people were named on that committee. So as I walked into the first meeting of the committee, and our then Attorney General, Ghulam Vahanvati, was there. As I walked into that meeting, I realized that it was the first time in the history of India that the Supreme Court, which was always backing our right for free speech, was actually suggesting, demanding new recommendations to curb our free speech. So in fact, I nudged Pranay Roy on my side. I said, Pranay, this is a committee we must sabotage. We can't let this come up with a report. So he said, how do we sabotage it? I said, we sabotage it by being ourselves. Let's stop attending meetings from now on. Let's find some excuse or the other. And this is a government committee. After a while, it will lose its way. Sure enough, that committee lost its way. But see, after that, the Kapadia judgment on freedom of speech. Not just that, look at the way the Supreme Court has now responded to Prashant Bhushan's expose on the visitors coming to the CBI chief's house. Now he's got a bunch of registers. There are many names there. The CBI director has not said, I haven't met these people. He's saying, I've been meeting these people, but maybe not as many times as these registers say, but I've been meeting these people. And what is the harm in my meeting the accused? I get to hear their side of the story. It's the first time I have heard, all of you have seen somebody dealing with a criminal case. Does the head of police in your state, DG police, meet every accused in a criminal case? In this case, it's the head of CBI. It's a case that Supreme Court should have considered purely on merit. Supreme Court, on the other hand, has directed Prashant Bhushan to disclose the source of his information. To me, it is outrageous and it is illiberal in the extreme. It's also illiberal in the manner that the media has not shown outrage at it. There is no law protecting my sources as a reporter in journalism. It is just a convention. It's a decent thing to do. I know that if I go to a court, most likely the judge will respect my source, the confidentiality of my source, so I can do my business. I can ply my trade honestly and correctly. Frankly, even if a judge asks me, he can pull out my fingernails, I will never disclose my source. I will never betray my source. But in this case, the Supreme Court of India is demanding that a very eminent lawyer who has some documents tell him his source when the target of that information is not denying that this is at least true in a sense. And there is so little protest. I think this shows you rising illiberalism. In judiciary today, and I'm focusing on judiciary for a couple of minutes, in judiciary today, denial of bail has become the norm. Under any jurisprudence, under any civilized society, under a constitution, bail is your fundamental right. Bail is your basic right. There has to be very good reason to deny you bail. But look at the way people are being denied bail, and these may not be people who are popular, and many people may think they are guilty, but Raja in jail for, I think, 15 months, Kanimuri in jail for 10 months, Jagat Mohan Reddy in your city in jail for 13 or 14 months, several other people in jail for 6 months, 8 months, Tarun Tejpal in jail for 7 or 8 months, serious alleged crime, but still 7 or 8 months. How can you justify keeping an accused in jail for so long without concluding a trial? In any case, once charge sheet is filed, once trial begins, how much can an accused do to sabotage the trial from outside? But what has now happened is, it's become almost impossible. Judges find it almost impossible to give bail because they think if they give bail, immediately TV channels will start shouting in the evening, oh, so-and-so walks free. Being on bail in a criminal case is not walking free. Oh, so-and-so walks free, khatam ho gaya, Suresh Kalmadi walks free, so-and-so walks free. So courts now find, by and large, the denial of bail is a better option. I'm not recommending to any court what to do with Jayalalitha's bail application. Because remember, Jayalalitha is a convict. She's not under trial. But courts have begun to take an illiberal view of many issues. That is the point I'm trying to make by using some extreme cases. Look at the number of death sentences handed out by trial courts in India in the past 5 years. It is very large. Most of these death sentences will not be carried out. Since independence in this great country, I must say, although we have the death sentence on our statute books, only 51 or 52 people have been hanged in 67 years, which is not such a bad record. So there is a deterrence of death sentence, but not that many people are hanged. And these include the assassins of Mahatma Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, etc., etc., well-known national figures. Yet, see over the last 5 years, how many trial courts are now merrily handing out death sentences, not even caring whether they'll be carried out or not even knowing whether we have hangmen left or not. That profession has gone out of fashion even before journalists could. But judges now think that it's better to give the death sentence because everybody on prime time will then applaud. See what happened in the case of the Delhi rape. Everybody wanted death for these boys. Hang them by the nearest pole, but preferably castrate them before hanging them. These so-and-sos. What happened when a couple of cases of alleged rape came up and they've gone to trial against two prominent people, popular in our society? And I'll name Shaini Ahuja, Tarun Tejpal. There was no such demand. I'm not saying anybody is guilty, innocent until proven guilty. But that applied to those 4 boys also, or those 4 or 5. But nobody said that. Everybody said just hang them. Why are you wasting time? Ajmal Ahmad Kasab, why are you wasting time? Just shoot him. Hare Baba, just realize that to have him alive with you is the biggest blessing you have. The whole world knows now that Pakistanis were involved. He's a Pakistani. Even Pakistan can't deny that Lashkar-e-Taiba was involved in this. You've given him a free, long trial, after which you've hanged him. It's also a lesson to those in India who might somehow sympathize with the cause of terrorists or who might be persuaded to sympathize with them, because what do we tell them? What do we tell the people of Kashmir? That look, stay on with India. This is a decent country. You have freedoms in this country. You can disagree with me. I still treat you as a fellow Indian. You and I can argue, you and I can have a fight, but not a physical fight. But you have the right to my country's fundamental rights as much as I do or anybody else does. But that is now being increasingly denied. In fact, a judge of Supreme Court, I made the same point at another talk about the judiciary, and he made a very good point. He said, look, and I said judges are now under pressure from public opinion and the media to be rough, to provide rough justice. साले को लटका दो, एकदम लटका दो और नजर आए लटका हुआ वो, तभी मजा नहीं आएगा, नहीं तो उसके बिना। लेकिन मेरे जैसा ना हो, पुअर, गरीब, माइनॉरिटी, he should look like a criminal. If he looks like a criminal or a thief, hang the so and so. So in fact, this judge, whose name I should not take because that was a Chatham House discussion, and he's a very eminent Supreme Court judge. He's in line to be a Chief Justice in the course of time, and I think he'll make a very good CJ. He said, look, you made me think. I think that the judicial system has shifted its basic view from reformative justice, which should be the principle in a liberal democracy, to retributive justice, which is the principle in a dictatorship. Badla lo sale ko. State takes revenge on you. In a civilized society, state tries to reform you. And he said, look, there is a problem, and I think some of us have to reflect on it. And then what happens? The same judiciary then is attacked by the political class. Now you tell me, in this country, you can pass almost no law. Our political system today at the parliamentary level is more broken than American Congress. They may still be able to pass a law. In India, we cannot pass a law because even Modi has a majority in Lok Sabha, but Rajya Sabha, other people have majority. So he's not able to pass a law. In that parliament, where you cannot pass a basic, simple law like upping FDI from 26% to 49% in insurance, which will make no difference, it's just a symbolic thing. A little amendment has not been passed in spite of three successive governments having moved those amendments. We passed a constitutional amendment attacking the freedom of higher judiciary in 24 hours without any debate. Without any debate, a constitutional amendment was passed in both houses of parliament with total unanimity, giving parliament and the executive the upper hand over the judiciary. I mean, it was so one-sided and so unfairly worded that many people like me who've been critics of the judiciary lately are now feeling bad. Someone as sagacious as Fali Nariman has now risen to say that he is going to challenge it because it was done in a hurry. But there is no voice in public. Frankly, there's very little voice in the media as well. Because everybody now thinks, ठीक है, judiciary को मारो, पहले media को मारो, उसके बाद NGOs को मारो, उसके बाद judiciary को मारो. Now, it's a complete blackballing of NGOs. They are all anti-national. NGOs can do their stuff. You can disagree with them. You can argue with them. You can use power of parliament, state, judiciary, whatever, public opinion, argument to overrule them. But you can't send them to jail and you can't call them anti-national. I mean, anybody who disagrees with official policy or anybody who disagrees with majority policy is not anti-national, but that is what's happening. And what is our political class then doing? They are saying, oh, judiciary, it takes too long to do these cases. We get stuck in our corruption cases. So we'll give ourselves fast-track courts. So thank you very much. The politicians get for themselves fast-track courts, whereas people like you and me will spend 30 years only to be proven innocent. Look, a man like J.J. Irani, chairman of Tata Steel, it took him 25 years for the court to pronounce that he was not even prima facie guilty to be charged with a crime in the death of some workers in a fire at his plant. 25 years if it takes a chairman of Tata Steel. Can you imagine what happens to an ordinary citizen? And the same politicians then say, we will have special fast-track courts for us. So it's a bit like going to the VIP ward in a hospital, mere liye theek thak hai, or setting up a Sanskriti school for your children in Delhi. And I'm sure other state capitals have similar schools where senior civil servants and politicians' children can go, while the rest of us have to wait in the line. So I'll speak for 5 more minutes and then maybe we can answer questions. There's need to reflect on where has this come from. It's very easy to blame a political party or a leader. But this streak started before that. Yogendra is not here right now, but if he was there, he would acknowledge the fact that I was among the very few people who had strong arguments with the Anna movement and then Kejriwal movement and Kejriwal politics. And one of those arguments was, first of all, that the Jan Lokpal law they wanted was a completely illiberal law. It was a law for North Korea. I know people love North Korea too, and it wasn't a North Korean boxer who was unfairly given a bout, but a South Korean boxer. But that law, the Jan Lokpal law, belongs to North Korea. It means I can spy on my neighbor. Read that law. I can spy on my neighbor and complain to Lokpal that my neighbor is stealing money. Then Lokpal will raid my neighbor. If my neighbor is caught, so for any money that's recovered from my neighbor or any money that is notionally saved from having been looted by my neighbor, I will be given 10%. And the neighbor will then be tried by the same Lokpal, who, if he convicts the neighbor, will also get 10% of the same amount. Which means everybody has a motive, a cash motive in getting everybody convicted for corruption. I mean, when every neighbor spies on every neighbor, when every court has a cash incentive for convicting you, not declaring you innocent, what kind of a law is it? And this was being done in the name of a liberal movement. In fact, I said, and because that law said that to keep it transparent, every step in this process will be videographed, and these videos will be available on DVD to anybody for 100 rupees. So I said, now time has come to do two things. I don't buy stocks and shares, but if you buy stocks and shares, number one, buy shares of DLF, Unitech, Hiranandani, GMR, GVK, all the builders in India, because from now on, they will all be building jails all over India, because half the country will be in jail. And second, start buying shares of Moser Bayer, because they have the monopoly over manufacture of CDs and DVDs in India. There will be billions of those being sold at subsidized price by the government, so their stock price will go up. I mean, it drew some reaction, but the fact is nobody read it. But my larger argument with the movement was that you are carrying out a political movement. Don't use the tricolor to argue with me, because once you use the tricolor, I cannot argue with you, because it's my flag as well. So don't usurp my nation. I can disagree with you and be a patriot. Don't say, मेरे पास आओ, जन लोकपाल, भारत माता की जय चाहिए तो जन लोकपाल चलाओ. If I disagree with Jan Lokpal, even then I can say Bharat Mata ki jai, because Bharat Mata is mine as much as yours. The flag is mine as much as yours. Jan Gan Man is mine as much as yours. But that is not the case right now. So this illiberalism picked up then. I think the media played it quite happily, particularly TV, because everybody thought that's where the TRPs were. And people didn't ask questions. It's not my brief that Suresh Kalmadi is corrupt or not corrupt. He's under trial. If he's corrupt, he should be convicted. If he's not corrupt, he should be let free. But no journalist had any business to describe him as congenitally corrupt. I mean, how do you know that his father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, great-grandfather are all corrupt? What do you mean congenitally corrupt? But one TV anchor would call him almost every evening congenitally corrupt, and the whole country would applaud. In fact, the educated classes in the whole country would applaud, because it's an English channel, and that channel had the highest ratings. Because gaali nikal raha hai, maza aa raha hai. This is not the way a liberal society works. This is not the way India had ever worked. So the change that came in India now came riding the crest of this wave as well. Now, there were some very genuine reasons for the change. Our self-esteem was really low in India. Because for 5 years, we had a government who nobody listened to. We had a prime minister who everybody walked all over. I'm sorry to use a tough expression, but in American corporate world, there is an expression called POPO, P-O-P-O. In fact, if you go to Google or Amazon, you'll find an old book bestseller called the POPO Principle, P-O-P-O Principle. So POPO stands for pissed on and passed over. That what happens in a corporation when you get passed over by someone and then you get pissed on all the time. That was the state of our Prime Minister for 5 years. And whatever people of India may want, whoever they may want as their Prime Minister, a majority of Indians never vote for a government in power. Right? A larger number always vote for other people, but first past the post becomes Prime Minister. They want their Prime Minister to be treated with respect, because it's with the institution of the Prime Minister that their own self-esteem and prestige is linked. They found for 5 years the Prime Minister was being given no respect. He wasn't talking to them. Today we are complaining about Narendra Modi and his government not giving us access and not talking to them. Arey Baba, for 5 years, forget 5 years, for 10 years, did Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi, Manmohan Singh talk to you? At least Narendra Modi tweets every other day. He gives a speech every day, forever. Those 3 for 10 years did not even give you a speech. So people were angry. People were angry. People had low self-esteem. It got linked with national pride, as it always does. And so you got this big change in India. Now there is time to wind down from it a little bit and focus on governance and get away from the emotional aspect of this change, because this emotional aspect is now making us a less tolerant country. I'll give you a couple more examples. I know it's 10 minutes to 3, so until 3? Until 3. All of you are aware of something that happened about 2.5 years back, when an Indian soldier was beheaded on the line of control. It was a terrible incident. It was a bloody awful thing to happen. And I'm sure all of us Indians, all of you were as angry as I was, or I was as angry as all the rest of you. But what happened that day? The same day, all of the media started. Pakistani murderers, killers, our soldiers are getting killed. It became such a kolaveri. I know everybody's forgotten that song also now, but just everybody was angry. That even Sushma Swaraj, somebody who is so gentle and personally so liberal and such a careful speaker, even she said, Bharat ke jawano, ek sir ke badle mein 10 sir le aao. You bring 10 heads from Pakistan. Now really, do we want our army to go and start beheading Pakistani soldiers? Do we want our army to be as inhuman as theirs? We want our army to be a tough army. But do we want it to be a medieval army? Forget it. That's too exotic a question. There was such noise and anger that even our Prime Minister, who had not spoken a word for God knows how many years, he spoke one sentence on the sidelines of a public event, where he said, after this, it can't be business as usual with Pakistan. So any talk of future talks with Pakistan was then suspended. But most importantly, how did we take revenge on Pakistan for the beheading of one of our soldiers? We banned Pakistani players from coming and playing at that year's IPL. So Pakistani players did not come, but we are also so incompetent that we forgot to ban their umpires. So their umpires came. One of them were also caught fixing matches on IPL and is now a wanted man in Pakistan like Dawood Ibrahim. Will never be turned over to us. Remember, 2 days before that incident on the LOC, 2 days before, Pakistani cricket team had played the third of its three-match ODI series in India very successfully. Our sporting contact had been broken after 26/11. It was restored now. Because of that one incident, we again broke it. Now, when I say that, people say, oh, so is it all right for them to behead our soldier? And are you okay if our soldiers are getting killed all the time? Certainly I am not. And I think whoever has done it should be called to account. But think, this incident happened, if I remember correctly, end of December 2012. In the year 2012, in the entire year 2012, how many Indian soldiers were killed on the line of control? Can anybody tell me? It was obviously a small number, but how many? It was only 2 soldiers in the whole year. Only in that incident. Until that incident in the end of December, not a single Indian soldier had been killed on the LOC in the entire year. And a day before that same incident, 3 Pakistanis were killed, the only Pakistanis killed. So 2012 actually was the most peaceful year on the line of control. A ceasefire had held for that long. It's a LOC where 20, 30, 50 people died every year. People used to live in bunkers, villagers used to live in bunkers, they used to walk in tunnels. The ceasefire was holding beautifully. Some local conflagration happened, one incident happened, and a hawa was built that our Jawans were being killed all the time. In fact, if you again go back and look at government's own figures, for ministry's figures for 2012, in the entire state of Jammu and Kashmir, a total of 14 uniformed personnel in all colors of uniform were killed in the entire year. This 14 includes 7 members of J&K police. In any state, some policemen unfortunately die in action. This was more peaceful than maybe any 3 districts of UP. Yet a hawa was built that there's a war going on. Nobody questioned it. And that is the most worrying part. Liberal voices are now falling silent. I might have a larger theory on it, but that's not the time for that, because I think we made our identification of liberal too closely with the left has done us a great disservice. But having said that, when these things happen, nobody speaks out. A couple more minutes, I can tell you one more incident in Pakistan. One of our prisoners who was convicted for being a spy was beaten to death in a Pakistani prison. What happened? There was noise in India, a public outcry. He was still a convicted prisoner, right? He was made into a hero. All right. At his funeral, everybody landed, even Rahul Gandhi, who only parachutes one day in a Dalit village, one day in a tribal village, one day on a commuter train, one day someplace else, one day someplace else. He also parachuted in that village for the funeral of the man Sarabjit Singh. How did the state respond in India? We now banned Pakistani hockey players from coming and playing in the Indian Hockey League. And how seriously can we take ourselves as a country? But that hawa that was created led to something else. It led to another death. It led to prisoners in Jammu jail beating up an old Pakistani prisoner to death as well. A prisoner beaten to death versus a prisoner beaten to death. Is that the way we want our country to be? Did anybody complain about it? Did anybody protest? Did anybody say, look, at least we should tell the world that our jails are better than Pakistan's jails? Nobody. Other institutions, look at the army. Our retiring chief, General Bikram Singh, he was asked on the day of his retirement, so sir, what did we do after the beheading of our soldier? So he said, something like Indian Army settled those scores in kind or something like that. Everybody said, well done. Nobody stopped to ask, so did you also send out soldiers and kill Pakistani soldiers and bring back their heads? Are we also into head hunting? Do we also want Indian Army to be head hunting? No question were raised by anybody. BJP, Congress, Aam Aadmi, left, right, nobody raised a question. Media, nobody raised a question. The new chief, as he was taking over, as I was asked, how will you respond to Pakistani provocation? He said, my reply will be immediate, and I think he said stern or something. Now, there is no war going on with Pakistan. Army chiefs in India have never talked like that. In India, these policies are controlled by the Cabinet Committee on Security. There's a multi-layered system. But this talk was immediately applauded. That, finally, our army chiefs can talk like Pakistan's army chiefs. Now, I will conclude with an example from Pakistan. It's a conversation I've used a few times in the past. So the person with whom it took place permitted me to use it, so I'm using it. This was with Mr. Nawaz Sharif when he was Prime Minister the last time, before Musharraf dismissed him. My wife and I were having lunch with him at his house, and he asked me, कि आपके मुल्क में भी जुडिशरी और मीडिया गवर्नमेंट में इतना इंटरफेयर करते हैं जितना पाकिस्तान में करते हैं? तो मैंने कहा जी इंटरफेयर क्या होता है? तो उसने कहा मैंने अपने नेवी चीफ को निकाल दिया, मेरे सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने स्टे कर दिया, उनकी कैसे हिम्मत? मैंने कहा जी कोर्ट की तो ताकत होती है करने की. तो उन्होंने कहा मैं उर्दू, हैदराबाद है, आप लोग थोड़ी उर्दू जानते हैं, मेरे से ज्यादा जानते हैं, तो उन्होंने कहा कि मेरी तो 2/3 अक्सरियत है, आई हैव 2/3 मेजॉरिटी, व्हाट रोल डू द कोर्ट्स हैव एंड व्हाट बिजनेस विद मीडिया हैव? सो आई सेड मियां साहब, in fact that's when I spoke that line. I said it's only when you have a majority that democracy needs institutions to protect people from majoritarian excess. मैं क्या बात करते हैं, मुझे को नहीं समझ आ रही. मैंने कहा जी आप कैसे करोगे? कहते मैं अपने जज ले आऊंगा यहाँ पे. तो मैंने कहा अपने जज ले आओगे, बेवकूफ होंगे. जब आपको कोई डिक्टेटर हटाएगा कल को और जेल में डालेगा तो वो जज आपकी मदद नहीं करेंगे. तो ये सर वो तो मेरे आदमी होंगे. मैंने कहा आपके आदमी होंगे पर वो पिग्मी होंगे, असली जज नहीं होंगे. असली जज तभी होंगे जब उनकी इंस्टीट्यूशनल पावर होगी. नहीं आप थोड़ा आपको नहीं समझ आती बात. Sure enough, that's what happened. He changed the judges. The army chief threw him out. He was put in jail. He went to court. Court said go to hell. They weighed him with the army chief. And he was then sent into exile. It was when he was on his exile many years later that he once called me, and he called me in a different context from Jeddah. And he said, जो आपने मुझे बात कही थी मैं बार बार याद करता हूँ, और अब जब मैं आऊँगा तो अपनी जुडिशरी की आज़ादी के लिए लड़ाई करूँगा. And then you know what happened in Pakistan? Musharraf tried to fight with the same judiciary. People came out on the streets. It was in that environment that Nawaz Sharif also came back to Pakistan. He fought for the freedom of his judiciary, as a consequence of which a dictator lost power, Musharraf. An elected government completed 5 years, Zardaris, and another elected government has now come into power with a majority. So these are lessons available all over the world. The lesson now is to become more liberal, to become more open, to become more argumentative, to love your country, but always be willing to say that maybe my country's policy or my country's government's policy on this issue is not right, or my country's government's policy on this issue can be wrong. There's not very fine, very clear distinction between government and country, national interest and political interest, nationalism and patriotism, strong views versus the other person's right to express her strong views. All these are very important for a democracy. I find that over the past many months, and frankly, it's not just because a certain party has come to power or a leader has come to power, but I would say for about 3 years, we started this process of wrapping ourselves in the tricolor and saying, because the tricolor is always right, I'm always right, my country is always right, and if you disagree with me, either you are a foreigner, or your loyalties are to someone else, or you are sold out, or you are corrupt, or you are a traitor. As simple as that. And these are tendencies that I think we have to strongly watch out against. I said aspiration to illiberal. It's mainly because, look, political thought comes out of mass movements. Our basic political thought, the ballast for our democracy, came from the freedom movement. I think that wave has now died. The second round came from the emergency. In fact, today if you see most people running the new government, or most people running opposition, anti-Congress parties, are led by people whom Mrs. Gandhi had sent to jail during the emergency. So the emergency created the second generation of Indian political leaders and thought. A third has not yet happened. More than half the voters now are born after Indira Gandhi's assassination. They have no nostalgia, they have very little ideology, they are very much the me generation of what many of you will know as a selfie generation. Everybody wants to be taking their own pictures and sending it to their mummy, daddy, brother, friend, Facebook, pals, etc., etc. So we are getting actually, instead of becoming more open, more insular. And in our country, I see this problem is even more pronounced because we have got hyper-connected before we could get properly literate. I don't mean literate as in reading 20 words and adding some figures. Literate in the sense of understanding the softer side of our lives. Our children are being driven into engineering school very early on in life. They study no history, geography, philosophy, political science, religion. Then suddenly they come out of college, engineering college or wherever, and they are curious about this. So they learn religion from tele-evangelists. If they are Hindus, they learn from illiterate Babas who talk rubbish. If you're Muslim, you will hear from a tele-evangelist. Muslims have now very popular tele-evangelists. Christians have always had them. So you get your crash course in religious practice, etc., etc. You learn about constitution from folklore or from urban legends. You learn about your country's tradition from the word of mouth and from political speeches today. So this big gap is making us an unquestioning, illiberal, intolerant, and very impatient society. We want everything done now. We don't want any delay no matter what happens. And that is something that I think we need to worry about. We have about 10 to 12 more minutes. We can take some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. But before we open this session for question and answers, I request Mrs. Malika Ramanathan to come here and hand over a small memento to Mr. Gupta. She has come all the way from Dubai to attend this program. We're really overwhelmed with the response. Mr. Gupta has to leave at 3:15 if he has to catch his flight. I'm going to take 3 questions from 3 different corners, and he will answer those questions together. One gentleman here, very quickly. Can we have the mic there, please? I'm sorry. Please. We'll take all 3 together.
All 3 together, if you can.
Mr. Gupta, I congratulate you on a very interesting exposition of the irrational and illiberal attitude of the people, including the press. I'm glad you commented on the speed with which the National Judicial Appointments Commission was passed. In the light of this, I have only one question to ask of you. I think there are also evidences of irrational attitude on the part of the higher judiciary. For instance, while dealing with contempt...
we can't hear you. Can we raise the voice, please? Volume? Mic ka volume.
Yeah. Now, while dealing with contempt cases, the judiciary held that even truth cannot be cited as a defense in contempt proceedings. That is something which I consider to be very irrational and unreasonable. Similarly, another case where they have not been very liberal in interpreting the Constitution is also evident we are not able to recall.
We can't hear you, sir.
I would like to know what your comments are on this particular... Now, Prashant Bhushan has handed an envelope to them giving a list of corrupt judges. Giving a list of corrupt judges. They have not allowed any publicity about that, nor have they ordered, as far as I know, any inquiry. I would like to know your comments on this.
I think the audio is not very good, but I think you want to know that if the court asks for the name of the person in a closed envelope, why should it not be given?
He said that the last thing he ended was when Prashant Bhushan had given a list of corrupt judges, that matter was hushed up and not debated or proceeded with.
Oh, I see. Look, anybody can give a list of corrupt anybody, right? But just by throwing mud, you have to find evidence. In fact, I examined some of those documents very carefully, also the Committee of Judicial Accountability, which was set up at that time. And I was actually dismayed to notice that almost all cases in that list, which were described in detail, were cases lost by lawyers who were members of the Committee on Judicial Accountability. So this also looked like a conflict of interest the way it was done.
Sir, we have a lady at the end.
Thank you for outlining, Mr. Gupta, about the fact that there is impatience and the impatience is not what we really should be moving towards. But there were instances of impatience that have led us to action. And Nirbhay, for example, is one such case. So we can't perhaps generalize. I think after 6.5 decades, perhaps a little more impatience leading to action may not be that bad after all.
See, I don't have a problem with impatience. I'm myself not a particularly patient person, although I'm not so young. There's no problem with impatience, but impatience, and we are a country that has traditionally accepted delays too easily. Everything is delayed in this country, from the construction of a bridge to the transmission of justice in a court of law. Right? Everything takes time, and people get resigned to their fate. So impatience is understandable. But impatience should not lead, impatience should lead to reform of government processes so that things move faster. Impatience should not lead to saying we don't need any processes. If we think this is right, then do it like the Chinese. We should not do things like the Chinese.
Sir, my name is Narendra Rath.
He's got
the Supreme Court collegium has been abolished in such a great hurry.
We can't hear you. Can you hold the mic properly here? One sec. Allow him. Please repeat your question. We couldn't hear you.
Hello?
Not you.
Yeah. The Supreme Court collegium has been abolished in such a great hurry by an act of parliament. May we have your comments, sir?
Sir, I'm sorry we couldn't hear you.
Sir,
Audio is not.
Madam, this is Narendra. Sir, in election time, we are now talking about the paid news, but actually it's not only election time.
it's in the media, any reporting or anything, it is in a commercial on the interest of giving something for the journalist or the media houses. Your comments on this, and also PRP rating, which is a main factor for all the programs, even in the electronic, and also the interest which is been focused in the print media is also in a different part, totally on the commercialization. Your comment.
I think I get your question. Paid news is the worst thing that could happen to media. In fact, paid news, I should have mentioned it, but there's limited time. Paid news is part of the phenomenon which has made our media so illiberal. And paid news now comes packaged in many ways. For example, in a particular paper, you may find a full page of stories on the harm that dirty water does to you, drinking dirty water does to you, and how you can make your water cleaner. In the same paper, you will find on every page, there is the ad for a new water purifier brand that somebody is launching. So, these are all legitimate stories. We know that the ganda pani pee ke bimar honge, but these have been deliberately done and positioned on one page on a particular day to create the need for a product that's being launched. So this is paid news as well. And this has terrible consequences, and this is not confined to print. TV does it all the time as well. During election campaigns, now packages are sold to TV channels. This many hours of interview. The same TV channel or same paper can on one page say so-and-so is winning. Another page say someone else is winning. Jayalalitha got a sentence last week. I was in Bangalore that day. I will not name the paper, but there was one major paper in the south, one major paper, which publishes almost everywhere in the south, which did not have a mention of that story on its page 1. No mention. Jayalalitha getting a 4-year sentence, losing her chief ministership, and this paper is headquartered in Chennai. Not a line on the page 1. What does that indicate? Well, I can also tell you now that Jayalalitha is probably, and her government, are the largest single advertiser in print media in India. Because they advertise and they don't give DAVP rates, they give full market rates. So a lot of the media is very careful dealing with our governments. These are very bad tendencies.
We can take one more question. Yes.
Yeah. The question was almost in furtherance to that. The content, the online content, or a one-line brief content like Twitter, is it changing the way people consume data? Or in the sense that it's a one-line, 140-word sentence and it's more of a conclusion rather than a 4-dimensional story to it?
How does...
Well, I'm a new convert to Twitter. I only got on Twitter 2 months back, and I must say it's quite useful. I also agree that social media, Twitter as well as Facebook and internet by and large, have contributed to deepening democracy and also widening democracy and also decentralizing power in many ways. Now it's almost impossible to hide anything because you can try and hide, but somebody will get it out somewhere. My only problem with social media or use of internet as a source of news is that it allows you the luxury of being anonymous. And anonymity brings out the worst in human beings. Because as long as I am saying I am Shekhar Gupta, I know that I am accountable for whatever I am going to say about you. But if I call myself something else, for example, I get abused on internet and Twitter a lot. But I also get abused by a lot of people who call themselves Kala Kutta, Bhigi Billi, Bauli Mooch. So it doesn't matter to me who's abusing me because it's somebody who's not even willing to reveal his or her name. So that brings out the worst in human beings, and that's not right because it can also be used to spread hatred. And I have to say that certain groups are now using Twitter and social media to attack those they disagree with and to make their lives impossible, to attack their families, their children, their intentions. And if they disagree with them, they call them all kinds of names, including traitor, anti-national, etc., 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 because they think the law doesn't apply to social media. So that is the negative side, but overall I think social media is deepening and widening our democracy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gupta.
Chandana, look here. Just one small question.
I think we can take one last question. Sunita Reddy. Yes.
So you spoke about the undermining of our institutions. So you gave an example of how when bail should be the exception rather than the rule. You've seen, of late how, especially among the political class, there's so many people languishing in jail for so long. So do you see any hope at all for our institutions in future, in the present government?
Well, I think these things have to be debated. The problem is that the main forum of debate in our country right now is the prime time TV in the evening, where unless you agree with the loudest noise, you will be shouted down. You will find 9 squares keep fighting with each other, and suddenly you find the volume goes up, and you realize you haven't touched the volume control, remote control. So somebody's volume goes up and shuts everybody up. And whoever takes a different view is then called a contrarian for no reason. Look, exactly. I know that we want everybody in jail now. That's the mood. I know that there is zero sympathy anywhere for Subrato Roy Sahara, right? So, it's just my stupidity that I pitch myself with the indefensible. But tell me, under which law, under which principle can you keep him in jail without trial, without conviction, until he returns a certain amount of money to the depositor? This is the justice of 10th century Baghdad.
And the media conducts the trial.
Media loves it. Media loves it. And the fact is that media has also been the beneficiary of the greatest largest from Sahara Group all this while. So media made no noise about what they were doing. Look at that other monstrosity, IIPM, which was taking out ads in every paper. I think in North India it was only the second largest advertiser in print media after Sahara. Every major paper had pages after pages of IIPM, right? Some of us said that what degrees they're offering don't seem to be right. Affiliations they're claiming with foreign universities don't seem to be accurate. But nobody joined that noise because everybody wanted the advertising. And the moment you did this, in fact, because our paper questioned them a few times, even I got invited to come to London and receive some award and travel by first class, etc., etc. Obviously, I didn't go. But he had a way of handling this. You remember his ponytail, etc. And I'll tell you what happens when we suspend our skepticism. Please go back to YouTube videos of Anna Hazare's fast in Delhi. Among the many people who paraded themselves on the microphone on his stage and sang his praises and asked for Vyavastha Parivartan is also Mr. Arindam whatever of IIPM. He is parading himself on Anna Hazare and Arvind Kejriwal's stage. So he was, projected as a great leader and a change maker. So this is what happens when a society, look, I say something in my newsroom to my fellow journalists, that whatever happens, never switch off the bullshit detector in your heads. I find that our society by and large now has switched off that bullshit detector. So we go in the evening, we watch whatever is being said and we hear the noise and we think that must be right. And I know I'm taking my own time and putting myself in trouble. But I'll just raise one question before going, and which is why I say skepticism is needed. Our CAG said that the money lost on spectrum, 2G spectrum, was 1,76,000 crores. Now, certainly it looks like there was corruption. Certainly it looks like there was money stolen. Certainly the punishment under Prevention of Corruption Act is the same whether you steal 10 crore rupees or 10 lakh crore rupees. Nobody can be sent to jail for 10,000 years. But 1,76,000 crores, everybody then repeated that number. 1,76,000 crores in 2007 was 4.71% of India's GDP. It was more than the turnover, 1.5 times the turnover of both brothers of Reliance combined. Just the value of this much spectrum. It was $2 billion more than twice as much as India's defense budget that year. Think, could the value of this much spectrum be more than twice as much India's defense budget? If that is the case, India doesn't need a defense budget. Our defense forces are sitting on so much spectrum. Every year they can keep auctioning this, and buying all the submarines and planes and tanks they need. But once that mythology is spread, nobody dares to question it. And if you question it, you are pro-corrupt, you must be in the pay of somebody. I mean, Commonwealth Games, we said 75,000 crore scam. Read Arvind Kejriwal's book. I'm not quoting folklore. His book, Swaraj, in the preface, he said 75,000 crore scam. Go back to internet, convert rupee into pound sterling in 2010. It is $9.7 billion. In 2012, the total cost of London Olympics where a city has been built is 9.2 billion pounds. So could the money stolen in our little Commonwealth Games be more than the entire money spent on the Olympics in London? That is not to say there were no scandals in Commonwealth Games. So when we start buying all this exaggeration and noise and we become part of the noise, that's when we suspend our judgment, we stop questioning, and we become illiberal. And I think if I don't end now, then I'll be coming right back and you will have to listen to me again.